Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The Efficiency Edge, How Smart Tech is Streamlining Life Sciences Manufacturing. We're excited you could join us. My name is Annie Falcone, and I'll be moderating today's event. Today, we'll be doing a deep dive into how to break free from outdated manufacturing processes and leverage technology for a more agile, efficient future. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by two speakers, Jack Young, Operations Manager at Revance, and Jason Tebbs, Customer Service Success Manager at MasterControl. But before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items. Please note that the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. If you'd like to enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right corner of your presentation window. And if you need technical assistance, click the Help widget located on the bottom left corner of your console. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or if we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. And please know that we do capture all your questions. So to kick off, I would like to ask each of our speakers to give a quick introduction of themselves and their work. Jack, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Jack Young. I joined through Revance, a skincare company. I've got about 25 years in various life sciences, emphasis in both the more cosmetic end as well as the pharma end, and roles in both quality control, laboratory environments, all the way through operations.
Great. We're so glad to have you. And Jason, how about you?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Jason Tebbs, Customer Success Manager with MasterControl. I've been doing this for a good handful of years. Been doing customer success my whole professional career. In MasterControl, we offer things like MES, QMS, a lot of things that go into systems that help with what you do on a day-to-day basis in terms of manufacturing, operations, quality, those sorts of things.
Great. Thank you both. So let's just dig on in. We are seeing tremendous change in manufacturing, marked by opportunities and challenges alike in this very fast-paced industry. What do you see as some of the key operational challenges and risks that are faced by life sciences manufacturers right now? Jack, I feel like you're primed to answer this first.
Sure. So one of the things that is certain is the regulatory landscape continues to change. As things develop, there's new requirements we grow into. I've personally experienced the scenario where the auditor is looking at things and they just came from a place that was doing something really well, and then they mention it in that audit that you probably need to start looking at doing such and such. And slowly those things continue to creep in. It's a best practice. It's not something you'd find in the guidance document or anything like that. And similarly, technology has done that. We've been able to measure things at much more sensitive levels today than we were, 10 or 20 years ago. And so those have helped us move things forward and change the landscape. And then risk is constant. It's where is the risk coming from and what's it look like? And I know for me, I always want to try and find that problem as soon as it occurs and try and get as real time as I can so that I can get as much information and figure out what happened, what we need to do about it, and how we can then step back and resolve it so that we can move forward with our concerns in the future.
Right. And Jason, what about you? What are you seeing as operational challenges that life sciences manufacturers are up against? Do you agree with what Jack has seen?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jack said. I think his last point about risk being a constant is key. And also, like, the only constant in life for many things is change. And your target's always going to be slightly moving, whether that's new regulations, new technologies, just new climates of economy, politics, all those different things. And your chain of operation is only going to be as strong as its weakest link. The unfortunate truth is oftentimes that weakest link is us, is people, it's individuals. We are not perfect beings. We make mistakes. So the goal is to minimize the amount of mistakes made and then minimize the criticality of those mistakes. And at MasterControl, we believe that one of those things that can help in that minimization is digitization. That's what our software is built off of. One of our big products that is gaining a lot of traction is our MES platform, manufacturing execution software. That's what MES stands for. And that's really anything related to your batch records, getting those off of paper into a digital system. Instead of using, handwriting on a gridded paper lines, you're using a pen, you can actually key those things in, make it a much quicker, more efficient process, and ultimately gain more accuracy, reduce that risk, reduce those errors, try and reduce that human element as much as possible. And ultimately, we hope it makes you make better decisions and faster decisions with what you're doing in your manufacturing process.
Right. So I want to touch on that acronym MES, Manufacturing Execution Systems or Software. How would you define an MES a little bit further, and how does it differ from other manufacturing systems like ERP or QMS? And where does electronic batch records, EBR, where does that fit in? Is that part of MES, or is MES something broader than that?
It's a lot of acronyms, and that's
so many
one of the funny things I had to learn when coming into this industry. Was like, okay, we got a ton of acronyms. What do they all mean? So, manufacturing execution versus ERP. So, oftentimes your ERP is going to be like holistically for the enterprise. It's kind of reconciling a lot of parts of the business, all the way from HR to manufacturing, top to bottom, where your MES, manufacturing execution system, that's going to be like specifically for your manufacturing lines. A lot of people can use it in a lot of different ways. We're not saying that it only has one specific thing it can do. Oftentimes these systems are flexible and they need to talk to each other. But manufacturing execution is going to stick with your manufacturing lines. Part of that is going to be your electronic batch records. Those go through your MES system, all that data capture, and oftentimes those will talk to your ERP system. So these things, they connect, they integrate, they talk to each other. In an ideal world, that's what they're doing. And then QMS is quality management systems. That's more on the quality side. So just making sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. But again, we want all of these systems to be able to work together and not be siloed. Like, you need information from one system to go into another.
Right. Okay. Thank you for explaining that, because that's a lot of acronyms.
Yeah.
And then, so Jack, I want to bring this to you. What did that digital transformation journey look like for you, and how did it help address some of those challenges that you discussed earlier?
So the first part of it was, what's this going to look like, and trying to understand what was going to be different from what we have, because I mean everything is on paper, or had been on paper prior to this activity of going to electronic batch records. And so, then what's the value we're going to get out of that? And there's a number of things that we can do with electronic records as we started to understand it, that I didn't have to necessarily rely on a second person or watching for, a transcription error or all these things. Those things I could build good, meaningful tools or filters to help alert us that we had a problem. And so it also meant that I didn't have to be on the floor to see those challenges as they popped up, or just to see the status of the batch record. I would have to go to the floor previously. And so in our production area, to give you a little bit of perspective, we're a semi-solid filling. We'll fill a lot of tubes and a variety of other products. Fill weights are incredibly important to us, and that's one of the most frequent entries we make in batch records. Well, through just a few mechanisms, we can provide notifications to various stakeholders, whether that's our quality department or supervisors. We can also give immediate feedback to those operators. And so we can take action now, as opposed to, maybe we don't find it until the review process, and that certainly makes it hard to figure out what happened when you're looking several days after the fact. And so those have helped us in understanding what we could do different, and it's also started to help us understand how we can prevent some big problems from coming. I think of, for me, on a personal level, the quality of our product, I want to make sure that I feel 100% comfortable with the safety of the product, and any of my family members taking it, whether it's the littlest ones or the oldest ones, and those that's really what drives my my push behind quality of the product. And these tools help us be able to do that in a way that I don't have to rely as much on the human factor of vigilance of is Jack going to catch everything there? And then it lets people know pretty quickly what is needed. And another benefit that I've found as I've started to use it is I don't have to have one separate record for every single product. There's some commonalities that make it easy for me to keep certain things together, and then make a grouping in certain ways that just make it a whole lot easier. So as somebody who wrote a lot of these batch records, I was able to say, some of these make sense to be together, and not always just have one record per SKU.
Right. Thank you. And it sounds like that's really streamlined a lot of your processes. And in addition to these digital systems, there's also, I would assume, an opportunity for automation, right? So I'd like to talk about that. Jason, how can automated processes reduce compliance risks and improve audit readiness?
Yeah, one kind of example that I like to give is, let's say in your manufacturing process, you have 3 people, person 1, 2, 3, and they do 3 separate tasks. Task A, B, C. So person 1's with A, 2 with B, 3 with C. And let's say that's on a piece of paper, and they're just pulling readings from an piece of equipment. So person 1 looks at equipment A, task A, writes down the reading for equipment A, moves it on to person 2. They do that same process through B for B. And then person 3, let's say at the end, has to do something like a calculation. A lot of things have to go right in that system. Okay, is your equipment even reading correctly? Is it giving you the right value? Did I read that value correctly? Did I write that value correctly? And is my handwriting legible enough that the next person can read through all those systems? Well, then person B, is that equipment calibrated correctly? Did they read it correctly? Did they write it correctly? Is that legible for the next person? And let's say the next person, like person C, has to do something like a calculation. If you're doing, 1 + 1 all day, you can write 2 over and over and over and over again. Like, that's not hard. But if you're doing anything like slightly more complicated than that, and you're doing it over and over and over, a human is going to make more mistakes than a calculator, right? And if the system can automatically just take, okay, what was reading 1 or reading A, what was reading 2 or reading B, and let's just automatically calculate that, especially if it's something beyond like super basic addition, that's going to be not only faster, it's going to be more accurate. And if you have a digital system, it's a lot easier to read a digital printout than it is somebody's handwriting. Like, you do not want Jason Tebbs to write on a piece of paper. My handwriting is awful. You want me to key something in. Now, if we take it even a step further, well, what if that data from that machine's automatically getting pulled and automatically getting logged into your record? And so is the next item, and so is the next item. Well, now you have 3 people that have a lot more time to do a lot more effective things in their day-to-day, rather than sitting there and logging number after number. It opens you up to get more value out of the personnel that you have, and you reduce that human error risk. And yeah, somebody still needs to verify it, trust but verify. But you have that system that's going to go faster, and it's going to be more accurate when you have these automated systems.
Right. Right, right, right. And Jack, you've alluded to your own journey with Revance. Can you walk us through your organization's manufacturing process before adopting MasterControl MX? What were the big challenges that you faced, and what made you consider a digital approach in a product?
So sure, in our in our system, our paper batch records, we print them out. We'd make sure they were complete. We'd get them to the line, and then once we got finished, then they would work their way through, review any corrections, things like that, and then eventually they'd get released by quality. Those pieces had typically took several days, and it wasn't uncommon to see it spread over a couple of weeks as well, especially when you throw in some of the lab testing as well. But sometimes I didn't learn about problems until somewhere in that review process where something got flagged. And, that's a problem, because then you've got to go back and figure out, where did it happen? What's impacted? Is there a path to remedy it? Or is it something that, is a showstopper? And, as we looked around, there were times that we need to find this batch record. It's out for corrections. Well, there was a number of people who had worked on that batch record, because we operate 7 days a week and around the clock for most days. And sometimes I wasn't sure exactly whose desk it was at when it was a paper record. And so when I go around and look, it was really hard to find a record. And, it's not a value add to be looking for a batch record that's just sitting in a binder on somebody's desk, or a stack of binders getting corrections. And it was very, very manual. And once we find it, we'd be able to get in and take care of what we need, or it might just have been, where is it? We need to get this one wrapped up. And this process has helped us get much closer to being able to find where things are. And I'm glad to say I've not lost an electronic record yet in the couple of years since we've been using this.
That's wonderful. And since you've been the primary builder of the MX templates, can you describe what that process has been like? Like, what type of records or processes were digitized first?
Sure. So I'm going to back up for a second and kind of help us understand how we could benefit from it. We ended up having a subject matter expert from MasterControl come in, and she really helped us build a couple of different drafts of records, one for our packaging area and one for more of our manufacturing area, where we'll make the different creams and process it, make emulsions, things like that. And she helped us challenge what we were doing and why it was different than paper records. We'd have so many of these things that would have second checks, or I had to have a person physically verify this calculation. I had to have someone else's eyes on it as well. I wanted to have someone else look at all these in-process checks. So those parts helped us in some of that, but this packaging area is really where we wanted to explore that a little bit further. And as we drilled into the packaging area, for example, those in-process checks that we do, all these fill weights, Jason mentioned the thing you do time and time and time again. Well, that's those in-process weight checks, among other in-process checks. You're doing multiples of those every hour, and they were handwritten in, and he's absolutely right. Handwriting does make a huge difference, depending on who's writing it. But the big part there was, what do we tackle first? And the volume and the labor is absolutely in our packaging areas. And it's really easy to look at that, because we know how many units we make of what products every month, every year, and we know how many more people it takes to package our products than some of the other processes. So that's why we drilled into the packaging area. And I'm really glad that we were able to from kickoff to being live with our first record was under 120 days. So it was a pretty good pace, but we just had to keep the ball moving.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you started with those high priority areas first instead of like starting small in a pilot phase and kind of working your way up. So that was an intentional choice to start with the high volume line first?
Yeah. So yes, it was intentional to go with that high volume line first. And here's a little why. Everybody was already familiar with that, a couple of those high volume products. And it really helped. So many people were already familiar with that one that it made it a good segue to say, all right, we were doing many of those batches every month. So we'd sit there and we'd say, all right, we know this. Now let's look at what we want it to look like. So everybody had a high familiarity. And then we just had to walk through those steps to say, all right, what's different? And kind of as much as we could simplify the steps to make it a successful change to implement. We were able to key in on, there's a couple of products that really run on one line, but it's huge volume. So what happened that first week that we started running this is we went from, we went from all paper records. We jumped all the way to almost 40% of our volume being electronic records. So there was a lot of touches there, and that helped people see really quickly. And those were the same people who were touching all of these other systems, but that got our quality team members engaged with it. That got all shifts of our packaging teams involved in it. And then also those other consumers of it who needed to have the information and be in tune to be able to get those QA releases and things like that were right with us as we step through that. So can't emphasize enough the value of the team.
Right. And Jason, how would MasterControl generally handle this when there's a lot of areas that you could start working with?
Yeah, a lot of times it comes down to what is the value that the customer sees and what's the areas that they want to focus on. But one thing that might surprise people that we sometimes suggest is, hey, let's take your most complex batch record and let's start there. Because when you're working with MasterControl, we're going to have a subject matter expert with you through that process, on that onboarding process. Jack mentioned that it was kind of an invaluable resource for them when they were getting started. And if you have that expertise with you that can walk you through your most complex process, it does a couple things. One, it's going to teach you the hardest way to do it. Well, not the hardest way to do it, but it's going to teach you how to do the hardest thing. And by contrast, everything from there should be slightly easier. And then second is, if you start with something super simple and you go live and everything's good, and the subject matter expert's like, hey, my time with you is done, you're live. And then you get to that super difficult thing and you're like, I actually don't know how to set this up, how to build this, what I should be doing in these different areas. That can cause some frustration, and it can cause kind of a blocker going forward. And then the other thing is, if you start with something super complex, you kind of prove from the gate that the system can handle what you need it to do. So oftentimes, not every single time, but a lot of times we say like, hey, let's prove the value. Let's go hard to easy, and get the ball rolling, and then from there you can go at your own pace.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Jack, were there any unexpected challenges or roadblocks that you had in those early stages? And if there were, how did you navigate those?
Yeah, so part of that was making sure our quality team had what they wanted to be able to go through and approve these electronic records. And so partway through the process, we decided that, the direction we wanted to use was continue to use our legacy quality management system to do the approvals of these batch records. And so that led me down a path to help them understand, here's the information that I can provide. So I can generate a PDF document of this template, and then we can drop that over into the electronic or into the quality management system. And run through the approval as we see fit. And even though that electronic batch record system does have its own approval process, the decision in the layout was just, it's going to be a better practice for us to use the current existing quality management system. And so that was a small challenge, but it took some other people who hadn't been really close to it, who really knew our quality management system, to say, what can we do? How can we do it?
Right. And Jason, from MasterControl side of things, do you have anything to add to that?
I think that's a great call out with the quality side. Oftentimes, when I'm working with customers, they'll want to do kind of a phased approach. They'll either start with quality and digitize that and then add manufacturing down the line, or vice versa. Very rarely do we see a customer go, okay, everything's going to digitize all at once. They don't want to shake up every single process at one time. But let's say we're going to start with manufacturing, going to a digital transformation. And quality might sit from where they're sitting and look over and be like, okay, how is this going to affect me? How am I going to be involved? How is this going to shake up the process that I do? Because as humans, we're territorial. We don't want our systems to be broken. We don't want our systems to be shifted by what somebody else is doing. A lot of times we see, what's in it for me? Like, okay, great, manufacturing, you're digitizing, but I'm quality, what's in it for me? So, what we need to do with quality is, from the manufacturing side, to say, hey, instead of having Jason with his terrible handwriting, logging in these numbers, now we have a digital system. They're going to be easier to read. We're going to hopefully we're going to have less errors. It's going to free up his time. And on the back end, that should be a lot easier for you as quality to review those things and give your approval and sign off on those things. Like, you should save time just by looking at our digital records over looking at our paper records. Like Jack said, we're not going to lose a batch record on somebody's desk in the corner of the warehouse, right? It's digital. You'll have access to it from seemingly anywhere, and you can look at that, view that risk. That then speeds up their process, which helps manufacturing, because now they can get something off the waiting room floor and ship it out sooner. So just because manufacturing digitized, they're not the only ones getting benefit. We can see benefit on the quality side, and then that in turn comes back to benefit on the manufacturing side. And it's the same, vice versa. If digital transformation starts with quality, well, manufacturing can be like, hey, at the very least, they're going to do their processes faster, so I can get my stuff out the door faster. So it really, digitization, even if it's just in one area, can be a win-win for both. And when both areas digitize, that's where they kind of snowball on top of each other.
Right. And I'd like to talk about the results, Jack, that you saw. Were there measurable improvements that Revance has seen since implementing this MasterControl MX?
Definitely. So the way we decided to start to look at it, and kind of thinking in a critical mass way, is, let's go ahead and just take the volume. How many SKUs, and based on the volume we run every month of those SKUs, what percent of the plant's volume is actually using electronic record? And so as we did that, as I pointed out earlier, that first month we jumped from 0 to 40% very quickly. And I'm glad to report now that more than 90% of our records are electronic for the packaging area. And so yes, there's still some that run, a few times a year or things like that. But now it's more common for us to see people who know the electronic record and aren't as familiar with these paper records that are still laying around. But by making the volume decision, it's helped us say, what's the biggest impact? And so another part of that for the paper to digital, though, has also, the documentation's gotten way better, and getting things wrapped up at the end of the batch has really gotten a lot better. So for perspective, most of the folks who help run the floor and make a lot of those batch record entries are high school educated. and there's not too many people who really enjoy working with a calculator to make sure everything looks right. And in fact, there's several folks I work with who they just get anxiety when they're having to do calculations. And those things can really impact our change over time. There have been multiple times where things have gotten drawn out when we're trying to go from the first product to the second product. And most of those calculations are addition, subtraction, where people have bigger problems are the multiplication and division, because if you get things out of order, it's not going to look right. And you have to have all those things before you can move on to the next batch. So, one of the stories I'm reminded about as I think about that is one of the ladies who's the quality coordinator on the floor. This first batch record had gotten off the ground, and it was that week. She asked me, she said something to the effect of, when do you think we can get more of these records? And, when, how soon can we get more? And I wasn't sure at first if it was a positive question or a negative question. And so I asked her some clarification, and she said, this is just so much better than what we've been doing. And she's like, I want to get more records sooner. And so that became an aha for me to see that those steps that we had taken to make sure people were on board with it, what it needed to look like, and how we were going to be doing things for each person that needed to touch that really had taken hold. And then they saw it on that very first record. So as Jason alluded to as well, being able to see that first record instead of trying to get everything at once was a good mindset change to say, let's get going. And I can tell you for sure, there was multiple things that as we started to see what was happening with the batch records and as new features became available, or features that I didn't know that it would be a good use of, like even seeing data from a previous entry. I could see that on the field before I keyed it in to say, yes, the expiration date is such and such. And I could just project the data into that to confirm that that is what indeed it showed. Simple things, but I was able to continue to step up the batch record to make it look better and more relevant, especially to what an end user needed it to be.
Right. And you're saying that you're 90% of the way there. Is the goal to someday have 100% electronic batch records? Is that kind of the next step in your transformation journey?
Indeed, it is. So we've got a lot of SKUs, and I think I mentioned some of those only run a couple of times a year. And so there's not a lot of impact for making that change. But obviously going ahead and getting those moved, we're continuing to prioritize what we need to have on that big list of what's still outstanding. But some of these are so small. And I've watched some of the users kind of work with batch records in ways that I wouldn't thought of. So some of that's been primarily through peers that are using it. There's some great discussion forums that MasterControl provides for users, and you start to get some ideas for other things you might be able to try and use. And I know that's it's of interest to me because it gets me thinking, how else should I be considering this tool, especially in some scenarios where I might not have a tool that does that, but someone has shown me, for instance, maybe incoming inspection might be able to be used as part of a batch record tool, an electronic batch record, to show that you've done the inspection, to show that things are good, to show that it's approved for use, in lieu of not having another mechanism to do that. So some of those things have helped me understand a different perspective that otherwise I just would not have thought of. And there's some really insightful and creative folks who understand how to use the tool, and I'm sure Jason's seen that from time to time as well. That it's let's see what those possibilities are, because there's just ways that while something was intended to be one thing, sometimes it turns out helping us in other ways that we don't realize.
And Jason, from MasterControl side of things, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so I like the story Jack gave where that lady comes to him and is like, "Hey, like when can we get more of these?" When people start seeing a process that brings efficiency, they want to replicate that in other areas. Like, we like to be more efficient with our processes. Like, that's at the end of the day the name of the game. So you see, okay, in Jack's case, we got one line that does 40% of our production volume. Awesome. Let's get that to 90. Let's get that to 100. You start to see that compounding interest on itself. And, we can finally get to this slide of hockey stick growth. In preparation for this, we were looking at Revance and Jack's kind of data points. And if we're looking at just the last 12 months, and if we say they saved 30 seconds per data capture, they've captured just under 2 million data points, which is almost 15,000 work hours. And if we reduce that to say, hey, let's just say 10, let's be conservative in our estimates of time save on a data capture, that's still 5,000 work hours in just the last 12 months. That's efficiency. If you can save 5,000 work hours, with 90% of your production volume, and it grew in the last year. It's not like they were 90% the whole entire year. Jack's been adding, more production volume onto the digital system. Like, it's just going to build upon itself. And then if you can implement that into other areas, like, okay, we have this line doing it. Let's get it to these other lines. I have another customer where right now they have 2 lines running on digital systems, and it took them a whole year to get these 2 lines up and running now. It's kind of their 2 main lines that they started with. But by the end of this year, they're hoping to go from 2 to 9. So they say, okay, let's accelerate what we're doing here. Let's double down on the efficiency gains that we're seeing. And if they're going to go from 2 to 9, like, that's over 4 times what they're currently doing. And so they're just going to see that much more efficiency. They're going to see that much more growth. And to do that in just 8 months is huge.
Yeah. Jack, are you seeing this kind of efficiency at Revance?
Yes. The time savings, we absolutely do see that. Generally, so I mentioned how much we put in fill weights. Those are keyed in, and then they're calculated. And then you got to put in like what the average is, check the control limit, things like that. And a lot of those, you've got 10 values before you can do the average. So you're keying into a calculator if you're doing it on paper. And so now they're just having to put the values in, and they're not having to spend the time doing keystrokes with the math on the calculator. They're just having to look at what the result is and make a determination. Do I need to take action because it's outside of a control limit, or can we continue to resume as is? And that does make a world of difference. Every one of our lines are doing fill checks, and we've got about 11 lines we're regularly using. Every one of those end users is getting the benefit from not having to go in and, whatever the frequency is for those in-process checks, some of them are 30 minutes. You're having to do those calculations. I recall several years ago, some people would put off calculating those averages, and no, you need to do those as you go. You really have got to. And now we don't have to worry about that part.
Right. And so, Jack, having gone through this whole digital transformation journey yourself, do you have advice that you'd give to other manufacturers who are considering moving away from their paper-based systems?
So I had participated in that kickoff and had gone live before I got to visit in one of MasterControl's forums. But one of their user forums, they refer to it as Summit. I had the opportunity to go to go to that the first year that we were using it, and being able to meet with other users and understand how they were using it, and the different folks who they started with quality QX instead of MX, and it helped me understand things that I could probably benefit for or look at, that some of them had not even started using it, but then the real value was those who've been using it for a while. And those helped me understand the what else. Instead of just saying, here's the boilerplate, it's like, oh, have you thought about such and such? Or how did you do this? Or what do you think you could figure out how to do this with? And so I saw as others also went live through those connections, that getting that first record live really helped people understand it in a daily application approach. And then they could see what it meant for the organization, specifically at Revance, what it meant for us. And we did make sure we had the right stakeholders in the room as we got going. And we were able to get it implemented in such a way that it really did affirm we were on the right path. And just small things to improve, and most of those improvements really happened for the end users. So it was more about how can we make things better at the line for the people who are actually doing these things.
Right. And looking forward, how do you expect manufacturing operations to evolve industry-wide? What role do you think data and analytics will play in that future?
So part of it, I think, is peers as well as ourselves. It's so easy to get information collected at the point of entry, and there's a lot of those things that don't require keystrokes. So I know that's something that's got my eye, and because if I'm doing hundreds of entries, hundreds of characters every hour, every single character is an opportunity to have an error. And if I can get those automatically drop in, like fill weights, that's less keystrokes on that person, less worrying about, am I paying attention? I don't have to have somebody with secretary high-speed typing skills to do these things. But if I can push a button and allow it to populate a batch record with the fill weight, that helps us. And that's why we need to look at those automation opportunities, because it can help the end user really. And that's where the time and the value, their time and attention, if they can spend it more on watching for problems and less sitting at a desk handwriting information, it can make a world of difference. And I think back 3 years ago, 1 or 2 lines had a computer, and those were more for like our serialization products. So in 3 years, some of our leads are used to not even having a computer at the desk. And now every single batch that they're running uses a computer to some extent. And even that last 10% that still needs done, there are some things that we're using a computer related to help us work with those products. And very soon, those will also be the electronic batch record for that last 10%. Those calculations, those keystrokes, it's a great opportunity to be able to leverage the opportunities as technology has advanced and it's gotten more affordable.
Right. And Jason, I'd love to hear your thoughts too on how you think manufacturing operations might evolve and what role data and analytics would have with that.
Yeah. At the end of the day, like, your data is your royalty. Data should drive everything that you're doing. Like, you can't just go off of a vibe. You can't go off of this feels safe, this feels comfortable. If the data is saying one thing and you have accurate data, like, it's hard to refute. You can say it's your word versus my word, but if we're looking at the actual output of this, the actual I's dotted, T's crossed, like, this is what the numbers say, like, that's hard to refute that. So if you want to be accurate with what you're producing, like your data has to be accurate, your input has to be accurate, your output has to be accurate. Like we said, or like I said from the top, like the goal is to minimize error, minimize risk, and minimize criticality of that. And a huge part of that is making sure that, hey, everything that's come out of this system is accurate, and we can make informed decisions off of that. So if you're doing something that's going to help thousands, millions of people, like, you better expect that data to be accurate, because me as an end user, you as an end user of these products that, you know, you might be manufacturing or somebody else might be manufacturing, like, you don't want to go in there and realize that, hey, none of this data is accurate, like it's all wrong. That really kneecaps, you know, trust in a system. So data is royalty. I can't emphasize that enough.
Right. All right. Thank you so much to you both. We just have a few minutes left, so I want to shift to some questions that came in from the audience. Someone wrote in, they said, we're still heavily paper-based. They'd like to know what advice you would give to help get buy-in from frontline teams who are hesitant about going digital. Jack, I feel like this might be your question.
Sure. Let's see. So the first part is making sure we've got the right team members involved. I have had some great challenges in working both on the quality side as well as the operations side, and my approach generally is I want to try and have that quality manager in step with me, so that I'm not, if they don't understand what I'm trying to accomplish, I don't know that I'm going to be successful at it. So having those connections and not surprising them has helped me a lot. And then it's the validation team, the other team members. We were blessed with the leadership team having a clear vision of what this meant for us. Thanks to one of our leaders in the IT group who helped get this project into the Capitol a couple of years ago, and his help helped me then be able to take it internally and run with it. And so having the right team members is really, really important, and being able to simplify those steps into, look, here's what it looks like on paper, here's what it can be like digitally. Don't overwhelm them with everything it'll do. Just show them, look, I think I can help you on your in-process checks. And I think we can do this in a way that's not going to be as burdensome. And hey, you might not even need to use your calculator since you really don't like to use one. And so that helped with the frontline folks. But we spent time with them and walked them through it. And then there's also another resource that the Academy environment that MasterControl, I spent a lot of time in that as I was learning to build batch records. But they have it for the people who make entries, the people who review things. It's really broken down into good courses that also help. But I see that more as a supplement to the working directly with the team members.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Someone wants to know, is it really better to start with your most complex process first? That feels risky. What would you say to teams who are afraid of going too big too soon? Jason, I feel like this one's for you.
Yeah, and I mentioned at MasterControl, we often say, like, hey, let's start with the most complex thing, just so you have that expert with you and you can kind of prove from the get-go that it's going to do what you need it to do. Another approach is, do similar to what Jack did. Like, okay, what is our biggest volume? Like, how can we get the biggest bang for buck? Where if we implement it here, we're going to have the most amount of people touch it as possible. We got a process that people are already familiar with, and it's going to integrate the most with our system. Like, okay, it feels like we're making a big ripple in the pond, but it's one of those things where if you can get something valuable up front, like you're getting that value for longer. If you just start with something over here in the corner that hardly anybody touches, hardly anybody's going to give you their buy-in. Like if I don't use a system for a whole entire year, I forget about that system. Then I got to relearn that system. Then I got to question like, okay, why are we doing this on this tiny process over here when 95% of my work is over here doing a different thing? Like that forms a bit of a disconnect if you're saying, hey, we're going to go in this digital, future, like this is the direction we're going, but our actions say like, we don't really want to do that.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, another question that came in, someone says, we're not ready for a full MES yet. Can we still benefit from digitizing just one part of our process? And where should we start? Jason, that's you, I think, too.
Sure. Look, you can find value with digitizing any part. Like if you just want to do a proof of concept from the very beginning, like I get it. We have a lot of customers that are like, hey, we're going to do it in a test environment. We want a proof of concept. We're going to have some people come in, give their opinion. Like there's a whole human psychology and end user adoption side of this as well. And hopefully in the testing and building phases, like this is where you're doing your small steps, where you're inviting people to go in. You say, hey, we have it on this small line. This is essentially what it's going to look like. What do you feel? What do you think? How's this going to help improve? What feedback do you have for us? That's where you can take like those small steps and already see some advantages. If you don't want to do your most complex thing, if you don't want to do like, we have one line that does 80% of our product, and like it's huge and tied into everything, like we just want to make sure it's proving value. Like that's a viable way to go. At the end of the day, you have goals that you're aiming to achieve. I'm here and my team is here to assist with what you want to do. Mm-hmm. We'll give you suggestions. We'll give you best practices. We're going to help you achieve the things that you want to do. So I'm not going to fault anybody for wanting to start smaller. I just think like, hey, if you start small, you just got to really keep your foot on the gas pedal to make that next step. If you take a really big step and the next step slightly smaller, it's a slightly easier step. But if you take a small step and you're scared to take the next step, like let's try and eliminate that fear. Let's work together and let's keep the gas pedal going.
Great, thank you. Another question that came in, someone wants to know, how has going digital improved collaboration between manufacturing and quality teams? Have you seen less friction? Jack, that's your question.
So yeah, that's a good question. And there's a couple of points that relate to how Jason just answered that too. I think part of the scenario that helped with that, and to Jason's point there, some of the fear and the risk, one of the things that we did is while we still had a paper record, we also did some like side-by-side entries with the development record. So we weren't quite electronic yet, but we wanted to make sure everything was working and would work in place as opposed to in Jack's office. So we'd have them try those things out there. And so those parts helped us. But that also gave confidence to our quality team that what I had spent a lot of time helping craft this record or these additional records was going to fulfill what we needed. So there was less, there was some apprehension just that, okay, this is different. But then being able to be right there with them as they were going through those and also seeing the other ones. All right, hey, now we're going to go over to this other line and we're going to do these products too. And it wasn't a, here's the product, here's the documents, I'm out of here. It was show me what you're trying to do, what's the challenge, what's the concern, and let's step through it. So I was very much in offices and especially on floors, making sure people understood how they wanted to use it or how it was intended to be used. And then some of those things too brought up some really good points to say, hey, could you make it do this instead? Like maybe it's a certain message on how to prompt somebody if something's not right. Or maybe it's a different type of alert if there's something that's out of specification. So those things helped us. And then when they realized that we were actually taking what they were asking and doing something meaningful to help further mistake proof or reduce risk or just make things easier for the end user, that helped us have a good rapport with our quality team member. And that's also helped with that validation group to be more comfortable. And our validation group is part of our quality team. And they're comfortable with how we went with the validation approach we took, so that as we do some of these other things, it's not that it's maverick or anything like that. It's just we're taking this existing setting and we're using it, and we just weren't using it before, or we're using it a little bit differently with a different message.
Right. All right. And I think we have time for just one more question. Jason, someone said that Jason shared that data is king. They'd like to know where some maybe 2 to 3 metrics that manufacturers should track once they go digital so that they can prove success.
Yeah. At the end of the day, critically, let's say it takes the same amount of time to do a batch record on paper versus digital. Let's say those are exactly equal. Is your error rate up or down on a digital platform? Obviously, we want to see it down. We want to see less findings, less observations from regulatory bodies. Like, we want those errors to be down. Humans are not perfect. We want to minimize those errors, minimize the risk of those errors. So at the end of the day, like, if you have less errors, if you have less things that you need to fix, that's going to save you time. The thing you might see sooner is efficiency and time. So I think error rate reduction and time to completion reduction, we want to see both of those down. I will bet money that doing something digitally on a digital batch record moves quicker than a paper batch record, simply in the handover time of, I've filled out my part, now I got to hand it to Jack to fill out his part. Like, simply in that time alone, that's going to save you. Keying in value, that's going to save you time. Doing a calculation, that's going to save you time. Maybe you're not saving 30 seconds per, maybe you're not saving 10 seconds per, maybe it's just 5 seconds, even 1 second per data point, and you're doing millions and millions of data points. We want to see time to completion on a batch record come down. We want to see error rate come down. I think those are 2 things that are fairly quick and obvious that you can start tracking from the get-go.
If I can add in there too, Jason, you mentioned, and that reminded me, and I forgot to mention it earlier, but the exception report system that MasterControl uses, I have thousands of data points, as he just pointed out. I can see just in an exception report which ones are out of range. I don't have to look at all 2,000 of them or however many of them. And I can see that instantly in a different view of the information. And that has tremendously helped us pinpoint where we have problems or where we have corrections.
That's wonderful. And I think that's a perfect little bow to tie onto our discussion today. That's all the time that we have today. And this has been such a treat. I want to thank our speakers, Jack and Jason, for a great discussion today. We really appreciate you sharing your insights and your expertise with us. And I'd also like to thank our audience for joining us today. We really hope we see you again soon. Have a great day.